Okay, you guys, we're going to get started. We're very, very honored and fortunate to have Scott Norton to join us today. He's going to give some, obviously, information about his entrepreneurial background, but he has a special connection with Providence, which is embodied in his grandfather, and I'm sure you'll introduce him, but I just wanted to say that we're happy, very honored to have you with us as well here at Brown University and in the Granoff Arts Center. So I'm gonna do any other thing. I'm just gonna turn it over to you, Scott, and let you do what you're gonna do. All right? Let's just welcome him, though. Come on.
Thank you, and my grandpa. Give it up for Monod. Awesome. Well, I was joking around with them earlier that what I have to share to you today is a lot of the lessons that I learned from my grandfather when I was a student here and got the opportunity to spend time eating lunch and dinner and breakfast with him. So I'm originally from San Francisco, from the Bay Area, and I actually went to Brown. And it's funny because when I first, did you guys all go to Brown? Most of you went to Brown, okay. Well, I bet you're all feeling a little bit about how I felt when I first got to Brown, that I was unqualified actually to be a student, right? Coming from like a little suburban town thinking, okay, oh my God, I'm going to this Ivy League school. I don't even know why they let me in. This is going to be really hard for me. I hope I can get good grades. And I felt totally unqualified to be a student. And now, 13 years later, I feel totally unqualified to be a teacher. So please bear with me, and hopefully what I have to share today is useful for all of you, and it's a perspective that you can all gain as entrepreneurs. I also have a little bit of a funny story, which is that when I was talking to Danny Warshay and to Liz, and they asked, would you do the keynote talk for the B-Lab kickoff this summer? And I was honored, and I said, absolutely. And so we were planning and figuring out where it was going to be and what I should talk about. And I think it was 2 days ago that I asked, okay, so how long do I have for this keynote? Thinking most keynotes that I do are maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And she said, oh, you have 2 hours. And I thought to myself, okay, this is going to be a little bit different, which is actually a really great thing because I have a lot to share that hopefully will be helpful to all of you. And I think as an audience that is actually putting ideas into action and working with other people, what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna do something that I don't normally do, and I'm gonna speak in more detail. And I'm gonna be totally an open book, and I'm gonna talk about some of the things that we learned over time. And not just at the superficial level, but really what are the things that have changed me as an individual and have changed me as a person, and that have helped our team and our company grow to what it is today and to, by some definition, succeed. So does everybody know what I do, like what I make? So I make condiments with character. That's ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, and now vegan mayonnaise. And you might ask, like, what is this guy doing, like making ketchup, right? We hear about, I grew up in Silicon Valley. So whether it was database technology or web applications, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, these are the things that people started companies around, right? This is what innovation is. But actually, the potential for innovation is anywhere where you might notice it, anywhere that is overlooked. And it was actually my senior year at Brown that I was talking with a friend, and we were remarking, after a friend had kind of planted this bug in my ear, that if you go to the supermarket and you look at mustards, there's a million different types of mustards. There's Dijon mustard, yellow mustard, honey mustard, sweet mustard, spicy brown mustard. There's all this choice. And if you go and look at yogurts in the dairy set, all of a sudden there were organic dairies, there were almond milks, there were flaxseed milks. There's all this choice and all this premiumization. It was clear that food in America was changing for the better. But condiments, and specifically ketchup, really had been left behind. So if you actually picked up a bottle of ketchup and you looked at what was in it, and you flipped it around, it was high fructose corn syrup, tomato concentrate, preservatives, synthetic sweeteners, things like this. It really resembled an industrial product more than it resembled a food product. And as food was getting better and ketchup really hadn't evolved in 70 years, we recognized that, hey, here's this quintessential American food that defines the way that a country eats. Everybody has a relationship with it. But because it was being left behind, there was an opportunity here. Everything else on the shelf had the exact same packaging, the exact same positioning, the exact same flavor, the same ingredients. So yes, it was an industry and it was a product category that was dominated by Heinz, which was a monopoly. But even more importantly, the number 2 player, the number 3 player, the store brand, they all were just mimicking this one monopolist. They were all just assuming the same positioning. And so that's where we said, maybe we can actually try something here. Maybe, and it came from a point of curiosity, could we actually do something different and create a ketchup that was in line with the way that we wanted to eat as individuals and in line with the way that America wanted to eat, which is increasingly, natural ingredients in their food and making sure that if it's not food, it doesn't go into food. And also, very importantly, to what you are all working on, especially at this stage, but it's really a continuous and constant improvement, is to create a ketchup that was different, but also satisfied that very basic flavor profile that people look for when they grab a bottle of the stuff. Because whether you're 2 years old or you're 102 years old, you're a ketchup critic. You know whether when you eat something you like the taste of it, if it tastes good or not. You know if you accept it or reject it. And so we knew that we would have to be in this market in a place that would give people the nostalgia that they were looking for in food, but also give them the novelty that they're looking for. And this concept of a balance between novelty and nostalgia is something that we'll come back to later this morning. So this was a very important moment for us because it was the moment that we went from talking to doing. And you are all past that phase of just talking because you all have nascent enterprises that are in their early stages. You've already committed to spending your time to doing this. But this question is going to come up again and again, and you're going to have to renew your commitment to your businesses over and over again throughout the months and throughout the years. You're going to have to renew your commitments to team members, to existing product lines, to new product lines, to services. And so it's very important that you're aware and very self-conscious of these moments that you have a choice to make where there's talking and then there's doing. And this was a moment for us that we decided, you know what, let's do. And the first step to doing was in recognizing that, okay, and I've always believed that in life, opportunities don't come really through the front door, opportunities come through the side door. If it was easy as making a better ketchup and creating a successful company around that, then other companies would have done it. Ketchup, condiments would have just been like every other aisle of the supermarket. They would have just been like dairy or grass-fed beef. There was something else at play here. There was a culture code that we had to crack. We realized that in supermarkets in particular, and I'm giving these examples specifically to the food industry, but I can guarantee you that each and every one of your businesses and markets has a lesson to be learned here, which is that it's an attention war. If you want to win in business, you have to win people's attention. And in the supermarket in particular, when there's so much choice out there, you have to attract people's attention to get trial. We say that people taste, they eat with their eyes before they taste with their tongues. We knew that the product had to work really hard for us and the packaging had to work really hard for us on shelf and do a double take. People would have to see this and immediately in the blink of an eye know that's different and that's better and I'm enticed to try that. So in order to do that, we recognized that we would have to be dramatically different because we didn't have a reputation. So no one knew who we were as a company or as individuals. We were just a couple of college kids. We didn't have any advertising budget. We didn't have any marketing expertise, so we couldn't create awareness with any sort of ad campaign, which are flawed anyway, as you guys know, growing up in the digital native and social native generation. So we said the packaging has to work hard for us, and in order to garner that attention, we have to be dramatically different. So this is a first time that I'll reference something that you guys can write down, something that is a great book that's actually taught in that Engine 1010 course, which some of you might have taken, which is Seth Godin's book, The Purple Cow. How do you create something that's dramatically different? Well, you take every dimension and you do the opposite of what the market standard is. So for us, we looked at ketchup and we realized that all of these were in plastic bottles. And so we said, okay, plastic it's everyday. It's sort of a common product. Let's do something a little bit more special, premium. So we chose glass. We chose the high-end language of the European preserve of a glass jar. And this is the same glass jar. This happens to be mustard. But we launched this jar in ketchup, and it looks nothing like ketchup. It looks really dramatically different. And so likewise, too, we said, okay, these are all glass, and they're all squeeze bottles. Well, let's give ours a wide mouth jar and make that different and signal to people that this is something that should be enjoyed teaspoon by teaspoon, not just sort of indiscriminately put on the table. Let's show that there's something special here. And then finally, we recognize that ketchup is this very Americana product. It's synonymous with the roadside diner, with the 1950s, with fast food. And so what is sort of like America, but like a little bit elevated, a little bit more premium and special? Well, let's be English. So we created this character, Sir Kensington, who is a Victorian naturalist, a spice trader, a philanthropist, someone that represents our character of integrity and charm, and someone that represents pre-industrial food, someone that could speak for the brand that wasn't us as individuals, and that could really stand for the brand as greater than the people who are actually part of it and behind it. So that's how we got started, thinking about the brand positioning, recognizing that it wasn't just about what was in the product, but was in how it was perceived. Now, very importantly, what went in the product had to be dramatically different too. So of course, as you'd expect, we used all natural ingredients. We used whole tomatoes instead of tomato concentrate, which created an amazing texture and flavor. These are the things that sold the jar the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, and so on. But it's that packaging, that presentation, how you position yourself in culture that's going to help people be interested the first time. Now, how actually did we figure out, if we weren't chefs, if we weren't culinary experts, and I could barely heat up macaroni and cheese at the time, how did we figure out how to create a great ketchup? Well, what do your guys' friends think about your idea that you're working on? What do your friends think about your business? Are they supportive? No, I'm seeing nodding heads. Of course they're supportive, because they're your friends, right? But I will guarantee you that everything about your business right now will change in the future. Of course, who you are is only going to get stronger and stronger. Your value proposition is going to get stronger. The need in the market that you've observed will probably become more and more prominent, but the way you address that need and the way you solve that problem, that's going to change. We recognize that if we were to create a ketchup and invite our friends to taste it, they would all go, oh, this is amazing. Mark, Scott, I love the ketchup. Sir Kensington's so great. This is fantastic. Go. We needed to create an environment where people could tell us, this is shit. Make it better. So the way that we did that was by doing a blind tasting where we created 6 different ketchups. And we had all sorts of different ingredients in some of these ketchups. We made Christmas ketchups, spicy ketchups, maple ketchups, classic ketchups, and we looked at histories of ketchups, recipes that we could make homemade ketchup with. And what we did was we slipped these little invitations into people's mailboxes right there at Fonts in the mailroom. And it said, Sir Kensington invites you to a ketchup tasting. And people were like so intrigued by that. They were like, what is this? So they came to my apartment on Benefit Street. They tasted all these different ketchups. It was jacket required. They had to dress formally. My friend from RISD was DJing. And they would score the different ketchups. And we asked them, scale of 1 to 5. Do you like this ketchup? You know, does this ketchup taste good? Does it taste like ketchup? Does it taste healthy? And that allowed us to get real feedback. And we actually had Heinz in there as well, for people to say, these ketchups I liked and these ketchups I didn't like. So if you're familiar with this concept of design thinking, that you probably are and that you should definitely look into. You think about need finding and research, and think about ideating what the problem is, and think about prototyping the process, and then iterating and then launching. We were here prototyping something like ketchup. So we're taking this very kind of fundamental creative business practice and bringing it to something that was very low tech. So that was our prototyping phase. So then, and I'm going to talk a little bit about later on kind of this process of going from having this idea and launching this and actually deciding to do this full time. You know, I had a job in between when we did this at Brown and when we actually started doing it full time in New York. But it was during that time in this 2-year incubation period that we took the products, the ketchup that people liked the best, and we stopped making the ones that people didn't like, and we took these 2 that people really responded to, our classic ketchup and our spice ketchup, and that's what we brought to market. Those were the things that we launched with. So we started up and down the street, going to little cheese shops and going to little restaurants and going to trade shows, and finally we were able to get, after a couple of months, interest from great grocery stores like Whole Foods, Williams-Sonoma, Dean and DeLuca, these names that really represented who our early adopters were and how we could actually make a splash in the market and show that we were worthy of being part of this special part of American food culture. And we worked really hard on this for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And the business was growing, but it wasn't growing exponentially. It wasn't really growing like wildfire. And we were noticing that, yeah, we could get it in the stores, but it wasn't blowing the doors off. You know, it wasn't really anything special. And we asked this question, okay, why is this? You know, we really feel like we have something special. We started this business because we wanted to make a change in food culture. We're very passionate about food. And we wanted to start this business so that we could have an impact on business culture as well and create an organization with the values that we believe in that has a positive impact on society. But we weren't talking about any of these things. So instead, you know, whether it was on our social media or whether it was on a sell sheet or whether it was in a meeting, we were very much focused on the what of what we were doing. We were focused on the logic. Here are all the reasons why our ketchup is better. It's got 30% less sugar. It's got 50% less sodium. It's made from whole tomatoes. It's in a cute glass jar. But people weren't really responding to that. And so we took some time and we thought about, okay, if this message isn't really catching, what is it that we're not doing? If we feel like this is special, but the world isn't really taking note, how can we communicate in a different way that actually makes our story worth telling and worth sharing to other people? Has anyone, and now I'm going to talk about a little bit of the process of doing that before we take a little break, but has anyone seen the TED Talk called Start With Why by Simon Sinek? So raise your hand if you've seen that. Okay, great. So write it down and go watch this later. I'm going to summarize a bit of what this is all about. And something I saw, and there's a lot of different pieces of research and understanding that were brought into my life, but I spent some time and I thought about who it really is that we are and how we can actually put what we care about, who we are, into our communications and into these products. And basically, my experience over 7 years, meeting interesting people, seeing different brands succeed, seeing different businesses succeed, growing my business, and now selling it to Unilever last month, I've recognized that we as human beings, we as individuals, we think we're very rational, but we're not rational. We're actually just really good at rationalizing. We feel first, that's how we make our decision, and then we think about why that decision makes sense later. If human beings were rational, nobody would smoke cigarettes. Yes, it's a declining industry, but it's something that people do, right? If people were rational, then nobody would drive drunk. We do not live in a rational society. And there are two parts of our brain. There's the limbic brain, which is the center, and then there's the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, which developed much, much later, that's what has capacity for language and rational thought. That's what allows you to do a math problem. But that central brain that's much more ancient and much more primal, that's literally connected through the vagus nerve to our gut, which is why we talk about gut decisions, and why when we feel something, we don't just feel it in our head, we feel it in our body. That is what's always on, and that is what's always feeling. And that part of our brain that feels, that's the part of the brain that's responsible for our behavior. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for our decisions. And very importantly, when we talk about reputation and brand and behavior and whether someone's going to go in and buy one ketchup or another ketchup, or whether they're going to choose your service over another service, you'll be tempted to present all the reasons why they should switch. But really, people are looking for something deeper. They don't even know they're looking for it. It's subconscious, but people are looking for how you behave and whether or not you're trustworthy. Because if you flash back to the millions of years of human evolution, products didn't exist. Brands didn't exist. Businesses, organizations, maybe with the exception of like the Roman Empire that minted coinage, none of these things existed. All the operating system that we have to make decisions is based around how we judge other human beings and how we create trust in the community. And so when you meet someone and their body language is open and friendly, and they introduce you to people and they tell you jokes and their clothes are well presented, there's an immediate trust there. And you ask yourself this question, not rationally, but without really thinking about it, what are these person's motivations? Are they with me or against me? Are they on my team or are they on somebody else's team? Are they honest with me? Are they telling me just what I want to hear, or are we truly communicating? And just likewise, if someone is slouched over, they have tattered clothing, they don't really have a good attitude, and they want something from you, you don't trust them because you think that they have ulterior motives, a hidden agenda. So the question is that if people understand businesses and brands really with the same psychological technology that they understand each other, then how do you as a business act and perform like a fundamentally trustworthy human being? How do you act with authenticity and honesty and openness rather than by putting barriers in front of your customer for communication or really having an ulterior motive? Now, we live in a time where this ulterior motive is no longer trusted. The 20th century saw the rise and to some degree the fall of pure shareholder capitalism. And now, wonderfully, in the developed world, there is a change that's happening towards not shareholder capitalism, but stakeholder capitalism. Thinking about where are the products coming from? What is their impact on the environment? What is the impact on the communities that we source those products from or those services from in the case of labor? And what's the impact on the communities in terms of the employees at those companies, in terms of the role of the customer's life? And what we realized was that actually this love of food that we have, which is really easy, right? Raise your hand if you love food. Okay, we all love food. We're not all qualified to start food companies. Of course, qualification is I'm not qualified to start a food company. But my point is that a love of food, that is in some ways irrelevant. That's a given. But what you can do is you can recognize why is food special. And what we started to recognize is that food is special in society because food is this fundamental human practice, right, that creates intimacy and community. Food is something that creates community and connection between family, between friends. It's when we break bread with each other that we end up trusting each other. Food has these superpowers. There's a reason why Thanksgiving is a food holiday. Food also is special because it allows us intimacy and facilitates intimacy with nature. Everything we eat comes from nature, or should come from nature. Every animal, every plant ultimately comes from nature, and it's something that we enjoy and we experience, and understanding food is a way of understanding nature. In 2017, in the United States, we are starved for access to nature, especially if you're living in a city. We live in these glass and steel concrete buildings. We drive around in automobiles that run on gasoline. Our idea of urban living is to separate ourselves as much from the natural world as possible and put us in the easily kind of understood cubic urban built environment. That's not good for human beings. We're starved for this connection to nature. And so the love of food is also about a rejection of this new techno reality that we live in. And it's about going back to the analog. So if you can recognize these things and the superpower of food, and you realize that all these people are brought together by a love of food, but also the special role that food can play in our lives, and the possibility to challenge the status quo in food, to challenge the status quo in something like ketchup, the lowliest of American foods that hasn't changed in 70 years, then you've really got something going on. And so in that, we recognize that there is this special role that food plays in our lives and in culture. And so we defined as a company our mission, which is to bring integrity and charm to ordinary and overlooked food. Integrity is how we source our products and our ingredients, the quality of the produce that's used, the purity of that, the way that we process them, and the charm is that the purpose of food is to nourish, right? We all had to eat today, but it's also to entertain, right? When I asked who loves food, everybody's hand went up. Food is this thing that entertains us, and so Sir Kensington is what represents that charm and that creativity and that connection. So I'm going to pass around our mission here, which is a physical totem, and defining that mission was probably the most important marketing decision that we ever made. We give this to every one of our employees. We give this to our investors, to key customers, to key suppliers. And when we met for the first time with Unilever, the company that we have just joined, that was founded in the late 1800s around the concept of stakeholder capitalism, not shareholder capitalism, this was what helped them be inspired to recognize that we are aligned in our vision for the role that a consumer food products company can play. Because when you make food, what you produce literally becomes part of your customers' bodies, right? That's intimate. It gives them the energy that they need to live their lives. And you have to recognize and honor that. And all of you, whether you're in medicine, financial services, personal care, even pure play technology, there is some fundamental human truth that you're linking into that will give you the power to create a high leverage business and a message that compounds over time. So with that, I would like everyone to take 5 minutes and write down with your team, or actually do this individually, and then you can discuss it with your team later. What is your organization uniquely positioned to contribute to society in 5 years? So in 5 years, how does the world look different because of your business? What's the impact you're having? This is the beginning. Don't feel like you need to massage it into a mission statement, right? I bought my copy editor advertising friend some Thai food and worked with him on this mission statement for like 6 hours. So don't feel like you need to come up with it in 5 minutes. Obviously, I put a lot more thought into it than that. But start this conversation. The important part is to start. So let's just take 5 minutes. Think about that for yourself, and then we'll continue.
Scott, let me just ask,
yeah.
Are you thinking in terms of a single bullet, or are you thinking 2 or 3 bullet items?
I would brainstorm, right?
Full sentence, so
let it out.
Just get some stuff on the page.
Yeah, get some stuff on the page, right? So if you're
an idea,
just throw some ideas down there. Don't worry about making it pretty. Just think about like, okay, yeah, I mean, think about, what the contribution you can potentially have is in your wildest dreams. Envision that, and write 3 or 4, whatever you want to do. Does anyone need pad and pen? All right, how are we feeling? We ready to wrap this up? Okay, great. So, does anyone feel like they have something they want to share? You don't have to.
Oh, yes, you do.
You don't have to. I mean, this is also very importantly, this is a no judgment space, right? So the fact that you raise your hand, like that shows that you're willing to take a shot, right? You're willing to put some energy into it, and no one's going to judge what you have to say. So tell us what your company, the concept behind your company, and then what you wrote down.
Sure. So I am here. My partner is not, but we're Fresh Local 52, and we are semi in the food space. We are a vertical farming technology company. So we are a technology company, but we are working on aeroponic farming technology. And so I actually come from a policy nonprofit background, so I have a lot of ideas about what our unique addition to our society is in 5 years. That's why I joined this venture.
Yeah. So that you're saying you're motivated by a sense of purpose.
Yes, absolutely. What really drew me to there is the potential of aeroponic farming to deal with our food, energy, and water crises. It uses 90% less water, 95% less energy, and 75 times more efficient than traditional farming technologies. So in 5 years, I hope to see a much greater use of indoor farming technologies in general, which will hopefully be resulting in fresher and produce in our urban centers, as well as more efficient farming technologies to help deal with our food, water, energy crisis, and also new strategies to combat those crises, smarter systems, growth in aeroponic farming technology, but then also just growth in aeroponic farming in general.
Okay, wonderful. So it sounds like as your business grows, you'll have an impact on the freshness and the nutritive quality of produce, and also a reduction in the amount of resources used to create that produce and that nutrition.
That is the big picture goal.
Great.
A lot of steps to get there, but it might take more than 5 years, but
Wonderful.
that is the vision.
Anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, so me, my two brothers, who neither are here with me, we own a lifestyle design company, so we make backpacks. So right now we make a camera bag that we're looking to expand.
Cool.
So in 5 years, we believe that the nature of work is changing. You know, coffee shops and co-working spaces are becoming like the new norm, and we look to be like the everyday carry solution for that through honest design and convenience.
And what does that do for people?
It makes it easier for them to do more with their day. Without getting into too much, it just allows them to be more organized, to carry their gym clothes, make their lunch, so they can get more out of their day.
Yeah.
More efficient.
Get more out of their day, right? Like that, and that, develop that, run with that. Have fun with that.
So we're working on a device, a glove, that lets you touch objects in virtual reality and augmented reality and have like actual physical feeling for those objects.
Cool.
So a little blurb I wrote down is that we want to make the immaterial matter, which is both because it's a fun play on words, but also because like one of the current perceptions of digital objects and of virtual space, a digital space, is that things in it don't matter, or that they're very fleeting, the temporary, something on the internet can be copied and pasted and moved around in all these different ways. But as digital information and digital virtual spaces, augmented reality becomes greater and greater and greater part of our lives, which is what I personally believe that will happen as a technological trend. I believe that the sensation of touch will make these things seem more real to people. Not in terms of people thinking that, mistaking it with reality, but making it these virtual things that people see be important to them in like a personal way. So hopefully adding more sensation to these objects or these locations, these spaces, these ideas will make it so that people care more about like a virtual, thing that they've interacted with, as opposed to it being something they forget.
So it'll create more connection with things that people have a need to relate to and a desire to relate to, and it's going to facilitate that, which then, no, please.
Additional to that, like the way we see it is like the application are like enormous. Like let's say for education, instead of like children having to go to like school or like laboratory in order to like experience things, they can just like wear the VR or AR headset, and they can just like use our glove and experiment thing, like learning thing within like their house. So like it's kind of like reduce the barrier of like education, and also in training. If we can make like a more realistic training, then like they might reduce the list of people getting injured in the real site or something. Or even for the blind, like blind people, they cannot really like, if they want to learn things, they have to like touch and feel things. And if that thing doesn't exist, let's say people cannot provide like a living chicken for them to touch, they wouldn't be able to like know how chicken, like what's the chicken shape. But let's say they have our glove, they can just like learn and know whatever like they want to learn, like through like touching in the virtual object.
So education, it's an educational tool, people to learn, workplace training, workplace safety, and interaction. Great, wonderful. One more? Yeah, or we can do two more. Let's, please.
So we're working on a biotechnology solution for menstrual pain, and I think that like I always go back to the one-liner of like I want to make women 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've always had this question, when periods started up, I would show up to school and I'm like, how am I supposed to sit here and focus as much as all the other people who are not in pain right now? How am I supposed to sit here, feel like I'm gonna throw up, and be able to absorb the material as much as the person next to me who's never experienced that pain before? And I think that there's not enough options out there for women to take care of this and take control of their body. And I think that when I was kind of writing stuff down, it's more just like giving freedom to women to have options for complete pain relief during what's now known as the worst time of the month. It could be changed.
Wonderful, excellent. Very cohesive. Yes?
So in the coming years, up to 90% of the workforce is in danger of losing their jobs due to automation. So in a world that becomes increasingly devoid of purpose for so many individuals, we're going to enable them to find meaning by enabling and encouraging self-employment and entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. So when the traditional ways that people's livelihoods have been provided dissipates, you will provide an avenue for people to bring that to themselves on their own, or through whatever you're bringing. I don't know what your product or service is.
Value and just determine their own purpose.
Wonderful.
And on that, well, the idea is it's an open marketplace to connect a community with entrepreneurs in the area.
Cool.
And that the other thing I see being the future is that the entrepreneurs in the community will feel connected, and that'll create increased safety and well-being in your community and a familiarity with the people around you.
Great.
So everyone's getting more digital and separated. This is a reason to take that technology and bring it closer.
Wonderful. So communication and connection, and provide people a sense of purpose, livelihood, independence. All these are fundamentally very important things for society. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'll give you 3 examples of, you might say like, okay, Scott, like we're going to paint this big vision for the future, and we're going to like change the way that people work, and we're going to, provide sense of meaning to those who, were maybe not given necessarily a career that their previous generations got, or create, pain relief for equality. These things are great, but, we got a business to run. I want to just point out 3 successful organizations that I think have done this particularly well. So this concept of starting with why, starting with a sense of purpose. Can anyone name Nike's slogan or their mission? Just do it, right? So what does that mean? Well, it's actually about your own relationship with your willpower, right? So fundamentally, we all wake up in the morning and we think, oh, I should do this. I shouldn't hit the snooze button. I should probably go for a run. I should probably be at my desk 5 minutes early today. I really should organize this Dropbox folder, but like, I just can't be bothered right now. You should yourself to death all day long. And willpower, right, this conversation you have with yourself, this dialogue and this negative self-talk, Nike's saying, just do it, right? It's a Taoist approach to living your life. And what they represent is empowering athletes on and off the field. And they say, if you have a body, you are an athlete. And so Nike, obviously a very successful challenger company. And importantly, if you look at what products have they gone into, yes, they make shoes. But can you name any other company that makes shoes for Kobe Bryant and Eric Costin, right? The pro skateboarder. This is a brand that has gone all the way from skateboarding shoes to basketball shoes to track cleats. And even for a while when they owned Cole Haan, they were making, shoes for the office. That breadth, was that a pair of Cole Haans? There's a lot of Nike DNA in there. And that breadth is what is created when you have a sense of purpose. You also, of course, with Nike have incredible world-beating brand loyalty. People will buy one pair of Nike shoes and they'll buy it again and again and again. I'm sure people are wearing Nikes in this room right now. Is that your first pair?
It's my second pair. I got the same one.
You got the same ones. Talk about brand loyalty, right? You had an experience and you went right back there. Of course, the product has to be good. Of course, it has to be efficacious. But you get this incredible brand permission to go into new categories and inspire loyalty when you start with why and you hit this fundamental human truth. Let's take Apple, for instance, right? Apple's has very few advertising slogans or anything like that, but famously, they came out with in the late 80s the Think Different campaign, where they didn't say our computers are faster, we're at 200 megahertz and everyone else is at 186 megahertz. They didn't say we've got 2 megabytes of RAM where everyone else has 1 megabyte of RAM. Instead, they put their logo next to the phrase Think Different to Martha Graham, the dancer, to Pablo Picasso, to Salvador Dali, to Buzz Aldrin on the moon, to John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They said, we believe in the power of human creativity and innovation and the power of independent thinking and human thought. That was what they positioned themselves as. And now to this day, you see incredible brand evangelism for Apple, right? Whether it's Hollywood set directors and prop directors using Apple computers to communicate something about the users in a movie, or have you guys ever seen those iPhone cases that actually have the circle cut out in the back to show the Apple logo, right? That is insane brand advocacy when people are buying an iPhone case and that circle's cut out to show, hey, I'm a Mac user. I'm connected to this fundamental human truth of creativity and innovation. And another example, this is not a business, but an organization, is the United States of America, right? And when you talk about brand resilience, the power for when a brand or for a company to make a mistake and lose people's trust and then earn that trust back, or have a very strong buffer for how much faith people have in it. We're a country that for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, we've been fighting wars we can't afford for reasons we don't understand. Washington has been either in gridlock or in cacophony. And yet, there's incredible pride in the American dream and in the American spirit and what this country represents. And still, it's a destination for opportunity for immigrants all around the world. Why? America's why, as written in the Declaration of Independence, one of its many whys, is that people are created equal, that men and women are created equal. And that fundamental human truth about human equality that this country is built on, that's what people can go back to. They don't worry so much about who controls the Senate or the House. And yeah, we have a lot of problems, but ultimately what's going to get us through it is the fundamental why that this country was founded on. Any questions there? Wonderful. Yeah?
What do you face compromise?
I wasn't so good at AP US history.
I got 5.
So now we're going to talk briefly about the next stage of the journey, right? So I don't expect you to walk away from this summer knowing exactly what your purpose is and what your mission was. In fact, it took us actually about 5 years to write it down. You could probably do it faster, but don't feel like you need to rush it. You know, put it in beta, give it a shot, talk about it with your small team, and then begin to show it to people and see how they react, see how it feels for you. But one thing we learned pretty quickly in the process of growing Sir Kensington's, and we were proud, right? We were proud to be entrepreneurs. We were proud to have this vision. We were proud to create something new. But we soon realized that the fundamental skill of entrepreneurship after this first sort of concept phase is sales. And sales is a bitch. You're all going to learn through one way or another that actually growing your revenue and creating that relevance in the form of scale, whether it's in the form of marketing, that I know a lot of technology businesses are, rely on that for revenue and sales, or whether it's actual sales, any one of you in this room is in the business of getting other people's brains from point A to point B. And that, whether you're convincing a vendor to work with you or convincing a client to pick up your product, we were in this situation where we had this great catch-up. And we would be introduced by our investors and our friends to restaurateurs and to chefs. And we'd go into the kitchen with these chefs after finally get a meeting. And we'd say, this is Sir Kensington's ketchup. It's made with 30% less sugar. It's made with whole tomatoes. It tastes amazing. When you put it on your table, it's so special. And people would be like, yeah, I get it. And okay, how much does it cost? Okay, it's more expensive. All right, well, we'll call you back. And we said, great. We went in there. We talked about why the ketchup was so great. They tasted it on the spot. They tasted it with fries. They loved it. And we sat by the phone, and they never called us. So we wrote them an email. Hey, I'm sure you just forgot to get back to us. Like, just following up. No response. You're going to get ghosted more than you've ever been ghosted in your life by a factor of 10. Of all the 10 people that you reach out to, of all the 100 people that you reach out to, only a fraction is going to come back with an answer that you want. How do you change this? Well, what we realized was that, of course, in order to grow the business, we needed people to take action, and we needed them to change their behavior. We needed them to go from serving Heinz to serving Sir Kensington. So of course we went in there and we said, you're serving Heinz now. Here are all the reasons you're serving Sir Kensington's, right? There's the first problem, was using rational arguments. And we expected a change in action. But what we didn't necessarily recognize was that there's a chain of events that has to happen before someone changes their action. So of course, if someone's going to change, if they're going to change their behavior, if they're going to cooperate, if they're going to enroll in what you're doing, you have to show them the benefits. You really have to show them about what they care about and understand what their needs are in order to play to that, to engender that change, and show them how that aligning with you, adopting your product or your service, that's what's going to inspire them to create that change and take that action and really cooperate with you. However, that's a mistake too, because if you show up with someone you just met and you start talking about the benefits of your product, they're not listening. We don't listen in society anymore. We don't listen to people because we don't trust them. We don't listen to people that we just met. How many times you get a conference call or somebody at the bank is telling you about their new account that you should open, or someone's trying to sell you their new cell phone plan that goes in one ear and out the other. We are marketed to, in America, 6,000 times a day. We receive 6,000 on average different marketing and advertising slogans. That's all the voices that you have to break through as an entrepreneur to get someone to care about your backpack or about your marketplace. So how do you get people to listen? You have to create trust. Because remember, we went back all the way back to when I said everybody, right, all of my friends, if I had showed them Sir Kensington's, they would have been like, oh, this is great, we love it. And all of you, you have the trust of your friends. So how do you create trust with people? This is really challenging. But I'm going to give you 4 tools that you can use on a daily basis in order to create trust, to get people to listen, to describe the benefits and understand what the benefits truly of your product are, and inspire to action. So the first, and this is really crucial, and this is across the board, is self-awareness. You will recognize that when growing your business, your business will be held back by your own personal development as an individual and as a leader. Your business can never grow faster than you. Grandpa, what was it? It was a team only moves as fast as its leader, or a pack only moves as fast as its leader. And of course that has to do with your operating tempo, but it also has to do with where you are emotionally and the space that you give to other people and how you understand yourself. And I'll give you a simple example. If you get in a car and you're drunk, you're probably going to crash that car. You're not going to get to your destination. You're not going to be able to know how fast you're going. You're not going to be able to judge how far you need to be in order to brake. You're going to run through some stoplights. You maybe get to your destination, but it's going to be a really sloppy and difficult process, and you might either die or get arrested in the process. Operating a business, and frankly going through life without self-awareness, is like driving a car drunk. If you can be in a position where you actually understand, when I enter a social situation, how do I come off to other people? When you're feeling something inside of you that's either fear or excitement, how do you get to the point where you recognize, I have an intentional decision to make? Am I going to keep this inside, or am I going to show this to the world? Am I going to betray my feelings, or am I going to be open with my feelings? Or am I going to actually feel this fear and ignore this fear, not recognize this fear, and let this fear fester? And you will, all as entrepreneurs, be very afraid. And that's okay. It's okay, and it's part of the process. And it's especially okay if you recognize that you're feeling that fear. A great self-awareness concept that I really like comes from a friend of mine who's a sailor. He's a sailor, and he sails in the Mediterranean. And when you leave the port of Athens in a boat, you go along a landmass, this peninsula, which is a protected maritime environment. And you move for, many nautical miles, and all of a sudden you get to this promontory point. And at that promontory point, that's where you leave the safety of the harbor of Athens and you go out into the Aegean. And into the Aegean, into the Mediterranean, that's where you might have chaotic weather or uncertainty, and you might have tumultuous seas. And it's at that point between safety and uncertainty where the ancient Greeks put the Temple of Poseidon. The Temple of Poseidon Poseidon was the god of weather, and he was the god of the ocean. And when the ancient Greek sailors and navy would pass that point, they would pray to the Temple of Poseidon for clear skies and beneficial weather. And so it's at that moment, at the Temple of Poseidon, that they recognize, I am going from the known into the unknown. And so whether it's in your business, whether it's a personal emotion that you have, I counsel you to be intentional and cognizant about that moment and know, when was I safe? What was nostalgic for me? What was comfortable? And then now, where am I stepping into the fear? Where am I leaning into the fear and leaning into the unknown? All of you have taken this step by being even in this room today. If you choose to raise money, every day that you invest in this business, you are stepping deeper and deeper into the unknown. And you have to recognize, where is it that I might actually feel that fear so I can be conscious of that. So that self-awareness, being actually in control of your own actions and having an awareness of how you come off to other people, that's a really important skill to build trust and to get people's minds from point A to point B, whether it's your own employees or your investors or anything like that. When you have that self-awareness and maturity, it creates amazing trust. The second piece about creating trust, so if self-awareness is a foundation, is empathy. And empathy is being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding the world from their perspective. Because if you're trying to get someone's head from point A to point B and you're trying to inspire action in them, whether it be a supplier, an employee, an investor, a client, or you name it, maybe it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, if you don't understand the world from their perspective, how can you expect them to cooperate? How can you expect to align with them? Because you'll be pitching one thing, but they're actually interested in another. So you have to ask them a lot of questions, and the key to empathy is inquiry. There's actually a great deck of cards that a friend of mine made called Questions and Empathy, and it's a stack of cards this thick, produced by a design firm in New York, that are all around creating empathy. You can have an empathy journal by going through these and writing on them once a day. You can glance through them and ask, okay, before I sit down with this customer, before I sit down with this prospective employee, what are the questions that I should ask them to get in their head and understand where they are? Because it's in understanding their situation that you can actually prevent solutions for them that they can enroll in and then they can grow into. Because if we didn't understand what the business problems and the business challenges that our products could actually solve, we couldn't talk to them properly. And frankly, even by asking people what they're interested in and what challenges they're having, that will create and inspire that trust. The third piece of creating trust, what's crucial to sales and any kind of persuasive communication and emotional intelligence, is delayed gratification. Because every day you're going to work really hard in this business and you're going to see in your head a very straight line between point A and point B. Okay, we're going to manufacture the ketchup, we're going to go to restaurants and we're going to sell them the ketchup, and then we're going to wait for the checks to roll in. I'll tell you, it does not look like a straight line in real life. It wends and it winds and it gets very, very convoluted. It gets complicated, and you have to have the emotional wherewithal to recognize that that gratification, that benefit is going to be delayed. And that you will spend a lot of time with people, with customers, with investors, with suppliers, with your own employees, and you're going to be doing a lot of giving before you're going to be doing a lot of getting. And as Grandpa always said, if you want to be successful in life, you be a go-giver, not a go-getter. That delayed gratification, that recognition that you are going to be there to serve them, to listen to them and understand what their needs are before they're at all interested in buying what you have to sell, figuratively or literally, that's crucial in the process of emotional intelligence and creating trust in entrepreneurial environments. And finally, and this, by the way, is the cherry on top. This is what it's all about. If you want to create trust, it's linked to self-awareness, it's linked to delayed gratification, and it's linked to your own sanity, is gratitude. Spend time every day thinking about how lucky you are. You have to realize, guys, like, do you see where we are right now? Right? There are over 7 billion people on this planet, and you are roughly 24 of the luckiest. You have an incredible opportunity. You have one life to live. You have maybe 65 working years. And you're all in a position now where you are able to write your own script and write your own story of your business. And you can, in the process, inspire others, empower others, educate others. You are lucky people. If we remember this on a daily basis, if we think about this in the morning, or if we journal on this, write this down, and if we show gratitude to other people, it will create trust. You will be known as someone who is magnanimous. You will be known as a go-giver. And you will create a magnetism that brings people towards you and wants them, or that will get them to want to hear about your purpose and your vision, that will get them excited. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And everything I just mentioned is free. The most valuable things you can do to your business cost no money. Defining a sense of purpose, practicing gratitude, practicing empathy, all these things are free. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of cost associated with delayed gratification, but there's no other option. You don't have a choice. Gratitude is also really important, of course, internally, but externally, when you thank the people that have provided for you, when you thank the people that have shown you empathy, that have delayed their gratification for you, write handwritten thank you notes. Pick up the phone and describe your gratitude. Thank your customers. Spend time with them and show them that gratitude. That creates an amazing karmic energy that is going to fuel your business. So what I'd like everyone to do is just take 5 minutes then to write down where do they go, what do they do to get in a headspace of reflection. The reason I'm saying this is all these things sound great, right? Oh yeah, gratitude, I want to have that every day. Delayed gratification, empathy. Oh yeah, I got that. If you're focused maniacally on your business and the day-to-day nuts and bolts, you're going to have a million people calling you on the phone. Our inboxes and our emails have probably filled up just in the last hour that we've been in this room. How do you find time to actually get this perspective? So what do you need to do in your life to either take yourself out of the day-to-day, whether it's a coffee shop or going to the cabin in the woods, just write about for you, where do you go to reflect? Where do you go to think clearly? Do you want to take a break, or should we just go straight through? Just keep going. Okay, great, awesome. No, I'm good, yeah. If we do go to 12, is that too late? Yeah. Okay, I'll probably end around there. Yeah. What time is it now? 11. Okay. Right. All right, great. So anyone have anything that they want to share?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of into it in two ways. Like the thing that gives me perspective is I'm fascinated with history and sort of geopolitics, and so that always gives me a lot of perspective and a lot to be grateful for. The more you study history and what's going on in the world, and then I find like the most time for reflection, especially after spending some time like that, is so I'm very easily distracted. I'll play a mindless game that I don't really have to think about on the computer, and then I get to like, it's like my meditation time, and I go deep.
Cool. So it allows you to change the tape, focus on something else. And
Yeah, so my body
gives you some clarity.
Yeah, exactly. My body gets distracted, my mind can go.
Anyone else have anything to share? Where do you go to think, reflect? Yeah.
I kind of had a weird one.
Yeah, good. Weird is good, by the way. The weirder the better.
When I was abroad at public transportation, for some reason, I don't know, I just see like all these random people and just like be by myself and just something about traveling.
Yeah.
Being quiet was like, I don't know.
Absolutely. I'm in the same place. Like you feel like if you sit at a desk and try and do something, you fidget. But as soon as you're on a train or something, you feel that sense of motion, all of a sudden it frees up your brain to think. That's cool. What else? Anyone else? Yeah.
Two sort of places where I really free up my mind. One of them is in the shower, just because I feel like not only am I cleaning my body, but I'm also sort of cleaning my mind of anything that's sort of residual, like that's like stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And also when I go biking, I guess I could really just, it is meditative just because I'm doing the same action like over and over again. And I think sort of the act of moving definitely does contribute to sort of change my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that physical activity, I mean, the purpose of yoga, if you go back to the, Indian tradition, is to prepare the body for meditation. Because I don't know if there are any biologists in the room, but I think it's the parasympathetic, what is it? Parasympathetic nerve system. When you exercise that and you work that out, that actually allows for greater focus, which is why if you've ever heard of the runner's high, if you run or if you do yoga or you do biking, then the rest of the day you're going to think more clearly because that part of your nervous system has been stimulated and exercised. Do I have the science on that right? Okay, we'll deal with it later. Yeah, I personally love to spend time in nature. For me, that's where I go when I need to break off. I love to spend time in nature and get that clarity. And the reason why I had you do this is because there will be times where you're under a lot of stress. You might not notice it for a long time, and it's maybe going to compound. And in that moment where you think, I need to find a place where I can go and self-reflect, where I can think about self-awareness, where I can think about gratitude, all of these things are a really important piece of the puzzle, so you can make space for yourself there. So next we're going to talk about the leadership lessons that we learned. And I think that leadership is a really loaded word, right, that gets thrown around a lot. But I'm going to break down leadership into two things. The first is setting a compelling vision that people can actually sign on to and enroll in. And so like I described, we have our mission as a company, which is absolutely part of that vision, to bring integrity and charm to ordinary and overlooked food. Setting that mission is part of leadership. But practically, what does that mean? Like when our employees, our incredibly talented employees, are selling jars of ketchup at demo tables or going to meet with retailers, or they're working with our factory teams to change the tooling, it's hard to sort of understand how that activity actually connects to bringing integrity and charm to ordinary and overlooked food. And of course there is a connection, but I also think that part of business leadership and any organizational leadership is bringing some more clarity to not just the mission, but a goal or an objective. And so for us, we recognize that while we do have a mission, we needed to help people understand that what we're trying to do from a business perspective is to become America's leading natural condiment brand and make it very clear, right? This is the market we participate in. We're not interested currently in internationally. We have that word condiments in that goal because our product development team could always be asking the question, okay, well, if I find a compelling ordinary and overlooked tea or coffee or a savory snack, should I go into that? Should we apply our mission to that? We have to stay focused strategically. And we have to also define what leading means. If we want to be America's leading natural condiment brand, we define it as leading in terms of scale by sales in our key channels of retailers and restaurants, leading by innovation and literally leading the pack and creating new things for the market, but also leading in terms of reputation by knowing how valuable is our brand and how do people know us? What do people think of Sir Kensington? Because there's a lot of value in building that brand that goes back to getting people to enroll in your mission. And so as we set this goal, right, if we have this 5-year objective, very importantly as a leader, as your company grows and as you scale, when you start, and the people in this room, you'll spend tons of time with them every day and you'll hive mind, right? You can finish each other's sentences, you're co-founders or you're part of a very close-knit founding team. But as soon as you start to grow and you hire different employees, people will know what they're working on, but they don't necessarily know what they're working towards. And even if you set this pie in the sky vision that got them excited and enrolled in the first place, that's great. But you need to help them understand on a yearly basis, on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis, how does the actions that they take actually move the organization forward? How does it all ladder up into this big vision? So showing examples of people's work and keeping people accountable and showing what their responsibility is and what their impact is. Your team members, yourself included, but your team members, your responsibility as a leader and a manager to your employees is to actually show them the impact and the contribution that they're making to the organization. And it's to give back to them in the form of their own development, training, education, and sense of forward movement. So that's a really important part of leadership, is outlining that compelling vision and helping every member of your team understand how their work ladders up into that vision. The other very important part of leadership is setting a standard for behavior. I like to say that the only way to lead is by example. The standard of behavior that you set is how your employees and your team members are going to behave, and that's how they're going to act. If you cut people off in conversation, then you can't ask an employee not to cut people off in conversation. You are setting that standard for behavior. And so what this ultimately comes down to is values. Values is what you hold dear, the beliefs and standards of behavior that you have as a company and as a team, and what you espouse, the standards of behavior that you hold each other to, and the way that you behave for your customers, for your suppliers, and everybody in your community. So you all may have seen this when I passed around that values card, that our values as a company, the first is that our secret ingredient is people. So this really comes back to everything we do because of our people. Every idea we have, every successful execution, it all starts with the people. And we need to treat each other with respect, and we need to recognize that it's really all about the people. And I'll tell you, in any business, that's 100% true. Service business, product business, you name it, it's all about starting with you and your team, the people that are actually going to put that idea to work and make it happen. The second is that we act with honor, even when no one is looking. So this is about integrity to your word. It's also about delivering a very high standard of professional work that maybe even would be above what the average or the understood norms would be in your industry or in your market. The third is that we make condiments with character. So product integrity is right there wrapped up in our values. And then fourth and finally, we think long term. There are a lot of short-term thinkers and short-term thinking in the food business. That's what gotten our environment and our food system into the situation that it's currently in. And we want to be able to think around the bend. We want to be able to make decisions that are recognized as having a positive impact 3-5 years in the future, not just today. Now, of course, the short term is important. You've got to deliver on business results, because without a short term, there is no long term, but it's long-term thinking that helps us temper how our scale of impact creates positive growth over time. So we'll take a little bit of a break here to do another thought exercise. And what I'd like you all to do is write down 3 qualities, well, it could be more, but 3 qualities of leaders that have had a positive impact on your life. Could be different leaders, could be the same leader. 3 qualities of a leader that's had a positive impact on your life. Let's write those down. Awesome. Thank you. This is great. Okay, are we ready? Raise your hand if you need a little more time. All right, great. So let's start sharing. So why don't we slowly, so I can write them down, shout some of these qualities out. Genuine. Patient. Humble. like present. Charismatic. Reliable. Productive. Passionate. They're a communicator. Good communicator. Motivating, yeah. Disciplined. Hardworking. And wise. Wisdom. Calculated? What does that mean?
Like they're not making motions or taking actions.
Like intentional?
Yeah, yeah.
Responsible. Understanding. Positive. Knowledgeable. Any others? You guys have any? No? Sympathetic? Let's see. Empathetic, yeah. Great. So we'll pause there. But there's a reason why I asked the question, what are the qualities of leaders that have had a positive impact on you? Because if I had asked the question, what are the qualities of a great leader? We would probably have a little bit of a different list here. Because society has leadership narratives, management narratives, statesman narratives that are actually different from where the rubber hits the road to have a positive impact. At Sir Kensington's, we believe that the role of a leader is to enable their team. A leader's success is judged by their team's success, and a leader's job is to knock down barriers for their team. Which of these would you guys say requires any skill or ability? I mean, they all do it to some degree, but intelligent isn't even on here. I think I respect leaders who are intelligent, and leaders have had, leaders that have had a positive impact on me have been very intelligent. But that's really more about ability. I think knowledgeable, that definitely has to do with ability. Productive. Charismatic, yeah, to some degree. That takes practice, skill, and ability. Wisdom. But the point really that I'm trying to make is that, again, a lot of this stuff is free. And a lot of this stuff takes zero talent to start getting better at. In order to balance a balance sheet, to perform an audit, to write a functioning line of code, those are things that require, we'll call hard skills. These are all what are called the soft skills. But what I've learned and what you've illustrated is that these things that we call soft skills, these are actually the differentiating factors for a leader. And yeah, I think charisma is definitely the quality of a leader, but you don't go and take charisma classes. You can't get a degree in charisma. Actually, that's kind of what a Brown University degree is. You don't learn necessarily how to be productive in a way that is procedural, right? You learn through your own exploration. And so I think it's important to recognize yourself as a leader, what are you putting your energy into, and recognizing that the forms of strength that you can have to grow your organization have a lot to do with your emotional awareness compared to your ability necessarily to strategize. So those things are very important, but these are really the skills that have impacted all of you, and that I would ask you to think about, reflect on, and see if you can inspire those in your organization. So that, for the most part, is what I wanted to share today. And I told a little bit about our narrative and how we grew, but really what I wanted to focus on was that after doing what I do, being an entrepreneur, growing a company, and now selling a company, the things that I wish I had heard way back in the day, the things that my investors didn't necessarily tell me, were that emotional intelligence, that's an extremely important factor to leadership, to success, to vision, to getting people excited, to enrolling customers. And this is actually the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship, is that you may make money in the process. You may lose money in the process for yourself or for investors. But just in the same way that if you were to be part of an athletics program in college or in high school, you're not running track because the goal is to get a 4-minute mile or to get 15% better every time you run. The goal is to shape your character. And if you see entrepreneurship as a tool to grow and shape your own character, to shape yourself as a leader, then I guarantee you that the fulfillment that you're looking for will come. And that it's an amazing position that we're all in, that we can be very grateful for. But the work that you do as leaders of an organization is a tool to not only progress yourself and to create that meaning for yourself, but luckily, amazingly, as leaders, you have the ability to create that value and to inspire others to ask the same questions about their own sense of purpose and create emotional and ability development and growth for them. So take care of yourselves, spend that time reflecting, think about these words and lessons that I shared today, and revisit those throughout your arc in your journey. So thank you. What questions? Yeah.
Have you ever?
And questions about anything. You can ask anything you want.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say that the Chipotle mayo is like the greatest thing.
Thank you.
Anyone try it out? It's amazing. Have you ever experienced like any sort of like burnout, and how did you get out of that, if you have?
So the question is, have I experienced burnout, and how do I get out of it? I don't think I've experienced burnout in the traditional sense where it's like I was like working myself to the bone, and I just had to like give up, or I got stressed out or anything like that. However, I've experienced forms of burnout. And one of the things that you'll find is that starting a business and growing a business is like peeling off layers of an onion. There are times where you're supposed to be in one layer doing one thing, and there are times where that doesn't work anymore. Especially in these early stages, it's going to be like running a new business every 6 months. All of a sudden, okay, we have employees, and how do we deal with that? Or we have this new customer support, how do we deal with that? We don't just have one product line, we have 4 product lines across 5 manufacturers. It's a different business, and it changes as it goes along, and so you have to change too. So there's this sort of concept of the winning strategy, right? Winning strategies is what you do, that's what you bring, that's what got you guys here today, the way that you give energy, receive energy, treat other people. And these winning strategies are winning strategies because they work until they don't anymore. So you may be used to micromanaging a project, and you might not define it like that, but others might. And at some point, you recognize that this company is too big for you to micromanage every project anymore. You need to find a new mode of governance. And in those moments, those Temple of Poseidon moments, you have to recognize something's not working here, I'm uncomfortable, I need to create conversation, we need to give each other feedback, we have to recognize our blind spots, and then we have to figure out a solution to this new stage of the business. And I have felt the pain of growing a business and going through my winning strategy, bringing the same Scott Norton that I took to work that was relevant and extremely effective 6 months ago or 12 months ago to the current position that was creating stress for other people and that was limiting our growth as an organization. And that has taken me to points where I actually had to force myself out and say, you know what, I'm going to take a little time and think about self-assessment, about what is it that's holding this company back? What are the modes of governance that myself and my partner should and can be putting in place, and not necessarily just running this business as we've always run it. Because if you always run this business, if you lead it and manage it like it is a 4-person startup, it's not going to get much bigger than a 4-person startup. You have to change the way that you think, and you have to constantly be inspired by other people to see how they do it and what they do. And so I highly recommend finding mentors in that. So I experienced burnout in that form.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have you ever run into ethical dilemmas where you're kind of in the trade-off between shareholders and stakeholders? In other words, like, you might have to compromise some of the values of the company. There's an opportunity to make more profits along the line. Have you ever had to have debates within the company about stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. There will always be tension. There's sort of two answers to that. So the first answer is that I believe that in the long term, a business that's run for its stakeholders is actually a business that's run for its shareholders. Because if you think about the concept of sustainability, for instance, if you run a fishing operation and you have 2 great quarters, but you fished all the fish out of the ocean and they're all gone, then that was great for those shareholders for 2 quarters, but not in the long term, right? And so when you take a stakeholder mentality and you think sustainably, it actually ends up being a shareholder mentality. That's a great kind of, fairy tale fast company explanation of why the stakeholder mentality is the winning one. But your question is a really, really good one, right? Which is, what do you do when you're faced with true trade-offs? Be it stakeholder, shareholder, be it 2 employees, be it what are our goals this year and what's the situation at hand. And that is where the values come in. When you take the time to ask your team members and you really give some work, spend a half day thinking about what are the beliefs that unify us, what are our values, then instead of just having a conversation going with your gut, which of course your gut is important, but by actually taking that decision and running it through your core values, how do we act long term in this decision? How do we act with honor in this decision? How do we recognize our secret ingredient as people in this decision? When you use these tools as a filter, that's how they actually become useful. That's the point of the values, is not just to put on the wall, it's to be a decision-making tool.
I guess kind of like a follow-up of that, how often did you have to defend those values to whether it be outside people or internal people, where you have to say, no, this is how we do it?
They're way more often galvanizing than they are something that causes tension. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was first, I should want to start saying, I was first introduced to your product, the Smith. And
Oh, cool. Great.
Which was a long time ago now.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking about maybe if you could speak to any milestone mapping or breakthrough mapping that Sir Kensington used perhaps in the earlier years.
Yeah. I wish we had done that kind of breakthrough mapping and milestone mapping. Maybe you could explain to the team kind of a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, I guess my original train of thought was I was thinking about, I can't say that I know exactly when your partnership with the Smith began, but I know it was a long time ago, and so I was thinking about...
in 2014, I think it was.
Okay. If there were any early, cells that you think that really changed the future of Sir Kensington's, and then thinking about now your progression to your sale. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
How you talk about your value is thinking long term. So how did that thinking long term institute itself into thinking about the progression of Sir Kensington?
Great. Well, I think what you're talking about relates directly to what I was speaking about when you set a vision for the business and you help people understand how their work contributes to that vision. In part and process to that, you understand if this is where we're trying to go, what are the milestones, what are the lily pads that we need to jump on in order to get there? So what's the build to get there? And the way that we think about this is the phrase we use is called a step change. And a step change is like, all right, if we hire someone to go sell restaurants, maybe at the beginning they're not very good. They can't sell any restaurant, any ketchup. And then all of a sudden, 2 months down the line, they get one restaurant, they get another restaurant, they get a third restaurant. Now they can durably and reliably create restaurant sales and create restaurant relationships, but those restaurants are all individual, single unit restaurants that go through 2 cases a week. The step change is asking the question, okay, if we're going to become America's leading natural condiment brand, how do we get this person and us as an organization to not just send out our field sales team to sell small accounts, but how do we get them to either sell single accounts that go through 20 cases of ketchup a week, right, and 10x their effectiveness that way, or restaurant chains that have one decision maker, we need to get one yes, in order to sell 20 a week for a chain. So still just 2 per unit, but now 20 for the chain. And that is what allows you to go from one plateau to another and say, okay, we have one individual, one organization, one individual as a salesperson, and they're this productive, and they create, a little bit of growth every time they make a sale. But if we can apply this person to bigger and bigger clients, and instead have them sell chain restaurants or large independents, and every step they make, they put the same amount of time and effort in, cost the same amount of money, now the step looks like this. And so all the work that they were able to do, in one decision was greater than all of their work. And so when you think about milestone mapping, it's about, okay, what's the step change? And you don't want to bite off more than you can chew too early, right? Like if you were to launch your marketplace in 23 countries all around the world, you would go crazy and you wouldn't see any adoption. Of course, if it worked, that'd be amazing because your numbers would be off the charts. But what you need to do first is start in a market, find your early adopters, figure out what the good things about your product are, focus on those, figure out what the bad things about your product are, stop doing those, rinse and repeat, iterate, and then scale, and then get to that step change. Because if we had gone to the Smith on the first day, they'd be like, well, this is before we changed the recipe, before we changed the package, before we had any existing clients. They would say, your recipe sucks, your package doesn't make sense for our tables, and by the way, I've never heard of you. Goodbye, right? And then you've shut that account down. So how long is it going to take for you to go back to them? It's a longer sales cycle. So you want to really phase, innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, things like that. So whether it's all parts of your business, operations, sales, marketing, your job as a leader is to put people in place that can work on the here and now so that you can see around the bend and provide that milestone mapping for people.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Are there any particular step chains that are especially meaningful to you?
Well, one huge step change for us was coming out with our mayonnaise, right? Because for the longest time, we actually built our whole concept of our company around ketchup. We had this narrative that we were telling ourselves. That ketchup was this quintessentially American food, like we talked about at the beginning, right? It was the ultimate ordinary and overlooked food. And we thought we could actually create a company of scale all around ketchup. We realized that retailers don't just want to sell a 2 SKU brand. They want to have something that they can extend, that they can make displays with. They want to be able to consolidate their vendors and really grow their category. And so the reason why mayonnaise was meaningful for us is not only because now it's our best-selling product line by a long shot, and it's what we're known for, and most of our products now are mayonnaise because we have so many flavors, and now we have this vegan mayo, but it represented a moment where we said we had a winning strategy, and then it stopped winning. And now we need to change the strategy and become not a ketchup company, but a condiments company. That moment was an important step change for us. It was a step change in that it doubled the number of products that we sold, and it allowed our business to grow commensurate with that. But I think for us, something like the Smith or PJ Clark's, another customer of ours, Bear Burger or Be Good if anyone goes to Boston, these all represent a class of restaurant that is defining a better version of new American casual food, and all of those were extremely meaningful for me. I think also, looking around the room and recognizing, oh my God, I have 20 employees, that was an important step change too, in recognizing that we need to stop making this about us and start making it about the team. I mean, the process of entrepreneurship is the process of surrendering the ego.
Why and when did you decide to sell, or that you wanted to sell?
Great question. Why did we decide to sell the business? A lot goes into a decision like this. So there are many different dimensions. So on one dimension, we had raised money from external investors, from angel investors and from private equity investors. And the beautiful thing about capitalism is that people will give you money to live your dreams and to build your ideas and to make an impact and a contribution. Now, of course, that comes with a bit of a Faustian bargain, because that means that if they hand you money, they're going to want to see more money back. So we always knew from the very beginning that in the decision to raise money from external investors, we would need to have some kind of an exit strategy. Realistically, investors, at least the ones that we're talking to, were not interested in a business that generates dividends. They weren't interested in what, I have a problem with the phrase, but what Silicon Valley calls a lifestyle business. And so at some point, we knew that we would be too small to go public with a business like this. And we, at some point, knew we would have to sell the business. And some parts of that were really exciting, right? Because it represents this moment of, oh my God, we've succeeded, someone's taken notice, we've made money, our investors have made money, now we have this bigger platform for the brand. But at the same time, too, you've all seen countless companies become part of bigger brands and organizations. And whether it's in the case of Yahoo that bought around 50 companies, right? And they do these, what's called an acqui-hire, and they would hire the team by buying the company, they'd lock them in with contracts, and then they would sunset the products. It was really a talent acquisition strategy. Or whether it was when, you know, a big soft drink company or a manufactured foods company will buy a product and they'll change the ingredients, they'll change the values, they'll fire the team. And the last thing we wanted to happen was for our brand and our business that our livelihood and our identity is wrapped up in to go under someone else's stewardship that actually doesn't give it the justice that we believe it deserves. That was scary for us. We decided to sell for a few reasons. One was that Unilever, as I mentioned, is a company that has values that are aligned with us. In the late 1800s in Victorian England, they had just actually started to realize scientifically and recognize that bacteria causes infection and it's bad for human health. So they had open sewers, there were things like diphtheria and typhoid, and in hospitals, doctors and nurses and surgeons weren't even washing their hands, right? This is how far society has come. And it was with the advent of soap that doctors and nurses and health professionals and also just common people at home recognized that in washing your hands and in washing your body, you can eliminate that bacteria, cleanse that bacteria, and actually improve human health. It's a super, super basic concept. But the beautiful thing was when William Lever of the Lever brothers worked with a chemist to create a soap that was based on plant oils rather than animal fats, that for every bar of soap that he sold, for every time he educated someone on the power of soap to cleanse, he was contributing to human health and wellness. And not only that in this contribution to the downstream society, but also this is a time in Victorian England and the Industrial Revolution where whether it was the, you know, Upton Sinclair's the jungle, or what you saw in kind of the coal mines, or in the Industrial Revolution, spinning looms, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, workers were not treated well, right? That's where the phrase sweatshop was first coined. And instead, William Lever decided to build a town called Port Sunlight for his employees to live in, to get benefits, to have access to health institutions, civil institutions. And so that stakeholder model of a downstream positive impact on society and an upstream positive impact on your workers with products that are rooted in values, that was the same way that we approach our business. And so stars don't align twice. We have interest, we got to know the team there, we really liked them as people, we recognized that they were committed to those values. If anything, when the global CEO of Unilever, Paul Pullman, came and sat in our office, he looked at us and he says, "Why aren't you guys a B corporation?" You know? And now we're doing that. And that helped us understand that these people are the real thing. And that, yeah, we could ignore this opportunity. We could wait, we could grow the business. Maybe we could get a bigger price for it. But it's much more valuable to us, and it's much more valuable to the people that are our constituents if it can be in the hands of someone that's values aligned, that trusts it, and in 30 years or 60 years' time, it's stronger than it's ever been. That, to us, is the reason why we decided to sell now. Yeah.
So you started at Sir Kensington in 2008, right?
We had the idea in 2008 at Brown. I worked for about a year and a half at an investment bank, and then I traveled around Asia on a folding bicycle for 10 months.
That's what I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Oh, what was that like?
That, yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
You started that summer after graduation.
Yeah.
You did it for like 2 years, right?
Say again?
You did it for like 2 years?
I did the bike trip for 10 months.
Okay.
I worked in Asia for about a year and a half, and then, my friend and I who went to Brown here studied physics. One of my best friends, he and I decided that, we're still young and that there was a big part of the world out there that we wanted to see. We loved riding bikes, as you do. Every Sunday, we would have an espresso and we'd ride around Rhode Island. We'd go down to, Narragansett and down to Barrington, and we'd just explore and have these adventures. And we were like, let's do this in Asia. So we went to 23 different countries, over 100 different cities, and it was an amazing process because we were having those Temple of Poseidon moments every day, right? We would be stuck after dark in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, a city without streetlights. Or every day when we wake up, there was no morning routine. We'd have to figure out, what am I eating? What language am I trying to pantomime in? Where am I going? What's the layout of the city? And so that was a really interesting experience because it really taught me that as human beings, we're all one culture. We focus a lot on our differences, but we're one species. We're fundamentally connected, and people are basically the same everywhere you go, and that was wonderful. So that was really meaningful for me.
And then after that, you chose to...
Yeah. After that, we had already sort of started talking about the concept of Sir Kensington, and my partner had already been starting in New York. Mark, my partner, he had already ordered the first pallet, started to do sales, and I decided, yeah, I'm going to come and join you, and we're going to do this thing together. And I moved to New York, and we just started hitting the streets.
Good job.
I have a lot of people to thank. I'm very grateful, I have the people at Brown to thank. I have my family to thank. I have my friends to thank. I'm just a vehicle for the sauce. Yeah.
Sorry for putting you on the spot before. This is Brown, so like
It's all good.
he probably has everything.
Yeah, all good. It's not putting me on the spot at all. I mean, that was really an important part of my history as a human being. Like, I would not have been able to do Sir Kensington's had I not traveled around Asia the way I did, because it got me familiar with navigating the unknown. Yes.
So I guess some people view like going to investment banking and startups kind of like the opposite ends of the spectrum. What was your experience like doing that first?
Yeah, so people view investment banking and startups as the opposite end of a spectrum. Whether you're an artist, an investment banker, an entrepreneur, everything exists in an economic framework, and everything is a people business. So I think that any experience you have, you can apply to starting a business, to entrepreneurship. In a lot of ways, and I happen to be working more on the capital market side, so it's even less of an entrepreneurial education than traditional investment banking. Having a traditional investment banking is actually really, really useful, because your job as an entrepreneur is to create economic value, and your job as an investment banker is to facilitate and understand and quantify economic value. So when you know the way that businesses are valued, you're in a very special position to be able to understand how you can create that. Culturally, they're very different, I understand that. But I think that it's all about your outlook, If you want it to be different, if you want it to be the polar opposite, then it's the polar opposite. If you want to see the commonalities, you'll see the commonalities.
Did you ever have before you started really getting into starting Sir Kensington, did you ever have doubts about this is what I want to do with my life?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a huge question. Also as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you can't really quit. Especially after you raise money. You can, of course, right? There are ways to design yourself out. There are ways to bow out gracefully. And there are ways to do it without it creating, a big disruption. But you got to be all in. And I think that I made a decision when I was in college that I would live my life like a character in a book. And I would make decisions based on what would make a really interesting book. So I always ask the question, okay, of these options that I have, where will be there more potential for adventure? What is going to make a better story? And I've just I lived my life like that. And yeah, there was absolutely fear and understanding like, well, wait a minute, like, you know, this path that's very uncertain, you know, I could flame out, I could be embarrassed by my failure. I could totally be misjudging the market, and so instead maybe I should go apply myself to something that's a little bit more stable, but I just can't deal with being bored. I can't deal with being bored. So I just decided to do this. Yeah.
So you talk about developing soft skill like gratitude, like empathy, like all those stuff. But it's like it's really hard to like measure like the improvement, like KPI. What's your process of like how do you develop those soft skills and how do you measure yourself?
You have to have open conversations with your loved ones, and you have open conversations with the people that you need to show up for, where they give you regular feedback. There's no way that you can measure it numerically, but if you are in a situation where you need to show up for someone, you need to show gratitude, you need to show openness and communication, you need to put yourself in the vulnerable position to hear from them, how am I doing? And I'll give you guys some resources of actually how do you have those conversations. There are some great frameworks, like Kim Scott created this one called Radical Candor. There's some other communication resources that I can share with you. I think also the first part where it starts with is taking, you know, it sounds a little wonky, but personality tests, personality assessments. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? You know, even knowing how you kind of score on some of these things, where you come out now, that will help you understand what your proclivities are, where you lean towards and where you don't. And I'm not saying you should be something you're not. In fact, it's actually the opposite. You know, as we all develop, we should be more truly who we are. But you're not going to find numbers, but you will be able to get that feedback from the people that you work with and from the people that are in your life. Believe me, my wife gives me a lot of great candid feedback.
Process of like developing those soft skills.
Say again?
What was your process of developing those soft skills?
Practice. It's about recognizing what needs to change, and it's about devoting time to it. You know, that's why I had us do this exercise of where do you go to think, because if you can give some thought to it and empty your brain out to think about a moment for gratitude, even if it's as simple as I happen to meditate, but even if you don't meditate, every morning set an intention for the day, right? Put yourself in the driver's seat. Write your own story. Set an intention for the day. Practicing that, I mean, it's very easy and it's free. It just takes commitment.
Scott, I'm going to ask the last question, if I may.
Great, yeah, please.
You've hit an interesting bifurcation in your life.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, so actually the way that, and I don't know if this is, you know, familiar to you, but we have decided to actually stay with the business for at least the next 3 years.
Okay.
So I've sold this business, so I don't own it anymore. But I also recognized that talking about what we were talking about, the legacy that we leave here, if we were to just sort of give them this business and let them integrate it, we couldn't have the total faith that it would live up to its potential. So for the next 3 years, I'll be continuing to run the business. My partner and I will be leading the team, and we'll be preparing it for the later stages such that what we talked about today doesn't leave when I leave the organization. And then from there, I've realized that, you know, in these next 3 years and beyond, there are 3 things I really love to do. The first is build, the second is learn, and the third is teach. So be it in an entrepreneurial context or working with an astute investor or something like that, I want to help entrepreneurs realize their dreams and build businesses that create value. So that's the next stage for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
You guys may think that what Scott has just done is easy. He makes it look easy, but that was an amazing piece of work, these 2 hours. I'm sort of in awe.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm really serious, and so I think we owe him an incredible debt of gratitude.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your presence and your awareness and your participation, because, you know, what you give is what you get.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm proud of you guys, too. I swear to God. So, pardon me?
I said you were gushing over here.
Yeah, I was, so at any rate, I'm really grateful for your guys' perspective on your ventures and whatnot. So I learned a lot about you guys today. We're just really early. This is
For
like
sure.
day 3, so we're still getting to know each other. And so you provided a great environment and opportunity for them to express themselves in thoughtful ways, as opposed to just kind of the balance sheet ways. So
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful to
thank
hear
you
from all of
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
All
yeah.
right.
Cheers.